What's good, everybody? You're watching Robot LVS, and today we have a special coaching video for A1 Charlie. Hello, Charlie, if you're watching. Thank you so much for allowing me to record this and to upload it to YouTube so that other people can learn from your experience. So today we're taking the 17 Lands website, and we're going to be going over a draft that Charlie did, which is a March of the Machine quick draft. Now, it is worth noting that I don't actually know how the bots draft. I don't know what kind of programming that they have, or if they're especially consistent with how they make colors work. I've done a couple of quick drafts, and it feels like maybe they have a consistent algorithm in that regard, but I don't know for sure. So when it comes to identifying open colors, I'm just going to act like we're drafting at a table of people. So starting out, we have in a rare slot Arrington Giada. This is a 2-color card that asks a whole lot of you, specifically to have lots of spells with flying or with flash on top of your library, and it's just not really a card worth first picking. Corruption of Tawashi is a pretty decent card inside of blue-black as well as blue-green. Really, it's just good in blue in general. There's a lot of stuff that can transform, especially incubate tokens, and this is a 4/4 that draws you a card and leaves this enchantment behind for a total of 7 mana. And that's decent. I think this is a defensible first pick. Over Invasion of Regatha, which is a little bit situational, and usually only especially good if your opponent has a 1 toughness creature in play. Timuret, a bit too committal. I don't really know if we want to be this heavy black this early on. And then there's Zephyrian Lancer, which is a great Knights card, but also Knights is a bit committal as well. Not really a card I'm looking to first pick. And then a lot of stuff in the other parts of the pack. Now we have, after the Corruption, a second Corruption. Second Corruption is tempting, and I think a lot of players, maybe even rightly so, might take it here. There's also a Dexus, an Herbology Instructor, Norn's Inquisitor, Phyrexian Awakening, Bolaslinger, just a lot of white cards inside this pack. So the cards that really jump out to me the most are Norn's Inquisitor, Herbology Instructor, and Corruption of Tawashi. A second Corruption of Tawashi means that you're going to get that effect a lot more frequently inside your deck, and if you're trying to build around the Corruption, that's good. It's very good, in fact. All you really need are a handful of things that transform, and you're going to get a Corruption a lot of your games, draw a lot of cards. You just need removal and cheap creatures, and you can probably survive long enough to bury your opponents in card advantage. Herbology Instructor is a card that I'm very, very high on. However, I'm inclined to try to stick to blue. Norn's Inquisitor is a card that is also quite good, but maybe, in my estimation, doesn't quite reach the same heights as Herbology Instructor specifically. I think I take this over the Norn's Inquisitor, and I might take the Corruption of Tawashi over the Herbology Instructor. However, Norn's Inquisitor is what gets taken. We have another Herbology Instructor, and I'm already feeling bad about passing the last one, so this is probably what I would take here, over some of these other cards inside the pack. I do like the Invasion of Maraganda, but if I'm going to be blue-green, and we already have a Corruption of Tawashi, it's a little bit awkward to have these cards inside the same deck, because we're wanting to play a bunch of slow transforming things, and although Invasion of Maraganda does flip, it also has 6 defense counters, and that's a lot. Ingaruni's not really an especially great blue card, it's just okay. There's also a Sculpted Perfection, which might be a little bit too committal this early inside the draft to be in 2 colors specifically. Then there's an Aerial Boost and Alabaster Host Sanctifier as good white cards. Weirdly enough, I think my pick would probably be either Skittering Surveyor or Herbology Instructor. Skittering Surveyor is good in pretty much any deck at all. It ensures your 3rd color or 4th land drop, whatever one you need more. And it's also a pretty decently sized creature. You can combine this with a lot of other secondary creatures to double block problematic bigger ones from your opponents, and that'll often be enough to finish off even some of the more annoying cards inside the format. And Inga, although the Scry 3 is quite nice, is just not that impressive. I've not actually seen the draw 3 cards thing happen even once inside this format. There's all sorts of stuff that throws the monkey wrenches into that plan, like random first strike, randomly having the creature get sacrificed so that Inga doesn't die, people removing Inga in response to blocks before it would get to trigger. All sorts of stuff happens to throw the monkey wrench into your plans, and it's also just a 4-mana 3/3. If I want to take a 3/3 that has a solid impact when I play it, and also a pretty great late game option, I'll just play the Herbology Instructor. Solid early game payoff. That is a 3/3 that does something cool in the late game. Next up, we have a pack that looks pretty strong. We have a Vat Keeper, Sculpted Perfection, Sunblessed Guardian, and Isaac Ataxius pretty far below those cards. As for me, I think I'm on the Elvish Vat Keeper. Maybe it is the case that black is not open, but we do have these two black cards in Sculpted Perfection and Elvish Vat Keeper still inside the pack. Isaac Ataxius would have been really, really good in the double corruption of Tawashi deck, but at this point, it doesn't really look like we're necessarily doing that. In fact, I'd be pretty surprised if the corruption tables. Inga Runais and Isaac Ataxius, bit of a non-bow as well. Like, if you want to play cards like Isaac Ataxius, what you want to do is on turn 4 have something to do while you're flipping up your Incubate token. You don't just want to add a bad creature to the board and then pass turn and then hope that you survive long enough and don't fall behind on tempo long enough to flip your Isaac Ataxius token. Elvish Vat Keeper, on the other hand, immediate beef on the board, and even if they kill it, you still have an Incubate 2 to boot. Very, very strong. In white, we have the Sunblessed Guardian, although most of the time I see this just be a 2/2 that often has to hang back until it can transform, and then around the time that it does transform, usually what I see happen is it gets blown out by an instant speed removal spell, and then you wasted your whole turn. It doesn't always happen that way, but it happens more often than I would like when I'm playing it. Also, a Sculpted Perfection. I don't really know if blue is what we want to get into. It doesn't look like there's a whole lot of blue inside these packs. It is only pick 4. It might just be the case that there's not a whole lot of blue inside the pack, and inside the last couple of packs. But for only a Corruption and an Inga Runais, we're just committing to blue a little bit too early when we have other stronger cards inside the pack. And I know that we don't usually want to commit to cards that are double color over single color, but considering the quality disparity, I think a card like Elvish Vat Keeper or like Sculpted Perfection would be much better. Now we have, a similar situation. We have Oracle, which is just an okay serviceable 2. Oculus Whelp, which would actually probably be a better pick than Inga Runais or Oracle of Tragedy inside this kind of deck if you're looking to have a whole bunch of stuff that transforms. There's also Invasion of Belanon if you're looking to be blue-white knights for some reason, even though right now we only have one knight and no payoffs. In green, we have the Renata, which I've actually been pretty impressed by. The initial stats, they're a little bit questionable, but it also just adds a whole lot of value to a lot of your late game stuff. And in green-white specifically, this card can kind of just go nuts. I've seen it do some very, very messed up stuff. When you're behind, it isn't the best, but there's a lot of forests that aren't very good when you're behind, like, say, Inga Runais, for instance. I think in your average deck that's green, Renata's going to be much stronger than Inga is in a deck that's blue. So I'm on Inga or the Invasion of Belanon. Definitely not on the Oracle, but I can see at this point why, if you're really committed to blue in your head, you might take this card. Now we have a good number of white cards inside the pack, but also a Cosmic Hunger. And considering that in the last pack I would have taken a green card, or this white card, and in the previous pack I would have taken another green card, The Cosmic Hunger really jumps out to me as a card that probably shouldn't still be inside the pack at pick 6. That means 5 other players have had a look at it, and they haven't taken it yet, which tells me that they're probably not base green, or at least maybe not base green. Although Zhalfirin Lancer is decent, at the end of the day, if you're not dedicated knights, it's just a 3/3 for 3, and you can find beef like that in a lot of colors. I'm on the removal spell. If I want to take a white card, I'm probably on the Alabaster Host Sanctifier. The reason for taking Lancer is because you kind of feel in your head like blue-white needs to be knights, which isn't true. There's some pretty cool blue-white knights payoffs, but overall, the card quality of blue-white knights is in the uncommons, specifically like the Marshal, as well as a couple of other things, and there's even a couple rares that do it as well. But Zhalfirin Lancer itself, if you're not dedicated, it's just not good enough. Cosmic Hunger for me, or Sanctifier as the backup if we're really wanting to commit to blue-white. Alright, well now we see a Storm the Seed Core as a decent green card that can definitely overwhelm, as well as a Fertilid's Favor and an Angelic Intervention. Weird to see a Meeting of Minds inside the pack this late, after how weird and not too great some of the blue cards have been. I might be tempted to hedge on the Meeting of Minds over any of these other cards, because they are a bit on the situational side. Even Storm the Seed Core, I think, is probably on rate worse in the green decks than Meeting of Minds is in blue decks. There's an Invasion of Xerix. There's also an Atraxas Ball, and an Enduring Bond Warden. At this point, I do think that I take the Invasion. We do have some white stuff, even in my version of the deck, that I would have built, and we do have some blue stuff, like Meeting of Minds, and this card's actually pretty decent if you can flip it. You do have to be a bit aggressive, though. I'm mostly taking it because I think it's better than Kithkin Billy Rider if I'm not modifying it, and I think it's better than Enduring Bond Warden if I'm not specifically doing things with counters, and so far I'm not. Alright, we see some pretty cool white cards inside this pack. We have another Lancer, another Sanctifier, and Knight of the Coalition. We're not going to get any of these cards back, which is, obviously not the best. It sucks, really. However, the Swordsworn Cavalier is probably the least tempting card out of this pack. Yeah, it's really cool in Knights, but you need to have a pretty high Knight count for this card to be good, and even in those decks, usually I just feel like Zhalfirin Lancer is better. Zhalfirin Lancer is a payoff and the setup. It is the knight that can attack through most things pretty effectively and pretty hard. It combos with multi cards like Knight of the New Coalition extremely well. Also, Invasion of Belenon, it combos into that card pretty strongly as well. And the Swordsworn Cavalier, if you're ever out of knights, is just a 3/1. And it's only 1 mana less than the Lancer, which can always block a 2/2 effectively, and makes 1/1s look very silly. Swordsworn Cavalier, really, really bad defender. So if you're wanting to stay in white, I'm on either the 2 or the 3. Probably leaning more towards the 2, but I think I can see why it feels like Charlie had went with this card. Now we have Phyrexian Awakening, Bola Slinger, some stuff. At this point inside the deck, it's looking like maybe we're a bit more on the blue-white flip stuff plan. Even though the second corruption of Tawashi didn't table, we have an Isaac Ataxius, we have an Invasion of Xerix, we have the Meeting of Minds, Corruption of Tawashi #1. Bola Slinger not really at its best in that deck. Phyrexian Awakening is better in that deck. It gives you an opportunity to attack the invasion without sacrificing any of your own tempo. Also, it makes it incubate 4, even though it's only 3 mana, which is pretty cool. We have an Aerial Boost and an Alabaster Host Sanctifier. Given that we don't really have that many 2s yet, I'm inclined to take the Alabaster Host Sanctifier. I think people tend to not take this card in Blue White Knights because they don't see the creature type Knight on it. Well, don't be fooled by that. It's still a perfectly fine card. Like, it's still a 2-2 with a relevant combat ability. Lifelink is pretty strong, so don't be turned off by this card if you're playing Knights. You'll play Aerial Boost in your random Knights deck, but like, just a playable 2 when you don't know if you're going to get enough 2s to make the deck work is probably better than a random pump spell. Another Invasion of Kylem's interesting, although admittedly I'm not very impressed with this card. So I would not take it here. But I don't think you're playing the Blighted Burgeoning either. For one, this is a card you have to splash, and you don't really want to splash your mana fixing, which is what this card is. Sure, it makes an Incubate token, but if you're going to take a green card anyway, I think I'd just take Chomping Kavu. It's, I think, pretty decent inside that deck, and Blighted Burgeoning, not really a card I'm looking to do anything with if I'm not splashing. Scroll Shift, however, is the card that I would take out of the pack. I think Scroll Shift works with at least one or two of the cards that you already have inside your deck, and specifically like Corruption of Tawashi, the Vigilance Phyrexian card, Phyrexian Awakening, is that it? And a couple of other things. Bullslinger over essentially nothing is justifiable. Placid Rottentail over nothing, and Fertilid's Favor as the last card. Okay, so there's a Rona. That's obviously quite good. Bomb rare. A looter that transforms into a amazing late game powerful card. Pretty good. Otherwise, there's Isaac Ataxius if you really want to still commit to that transform plan. Although Isaac Ataxius does sort of start to have diminishing returns because you have to spend mana on both sides of it, and you're doing a lot of wheels spinning in that deck. Not a whole lot else inside the pack that I really think is worth considering. It didn't really seem like black was open, so I'm not inclined to take the Collective Nightmare. It'd be cool to wield the Invasion of Belanon, or the Isaac Ataxius, I suppose. Or even the Change the Equation. I've played worse cards than this, although usually it ends up getting cut. Inga and Desika, pretty cool card, but not really something I'm thinking about splashing at this point. We don't really have the tools to do it. Invasion of Kamigawa, also a card I think that is cool, but has a very specific deck that you need to be playing in order to make it work. Usually I want to have stuff like Preening Champion before I'm really happy to play it. Although I suppose in Blue White Knights there's a chance that you can, stun something and be able to, hit a little bit into it without too much stuff going wrong. But even if you could do that, the backside's not that impressive. It's a 2-3, which oddly enough is not really the best stat line for flyers these days. Seal from Existence would probably be my pick out of this pack if I want to take a white card. I think I take it over Cut Short because it can hit any non-land permanent. It also is generally pretty easy to cast and doesn't require you to have their creature tapped, which is what Cut Short does. And if you are trying to be Blue-White Knights, which it looks like you are, you do want removal that isn't reliant on your opponent attacking you. And of course, there's some other stuff, nothing incredible. Nothing that I think I'd consider over the seal. There's a Goreclaw, which, if we had taken some of the green cards from later inside of, earlier and around the middle of Pack 1, I would definitely be inclined to take the Goreclaw here. But as it is, we passed up on a whole lot of green, and it might be worth asking if it's a bit too late inside the pack, or inside the draft. There's also a Streetwise Negotiator also in green that's quite good, and an Overgrown Pest that's also quite good. We don't really have any great green cards inside of our, deck right now. But even so, there's nothing great inside of white that we're going to be taking besides the Alabaster Host Intercessor. And if we're supposed to be in green, it feels like we should probably be taking the Overgrown Pest or the Goreclaw. As much as I really tend to enjoy the Goreclaw, right now I think I'd be taking the Overgrown Pest, which really just speaks to how impressed I am with Overgrown Pest than it does how disappointed I am with Goreclaw, because I'm not disappointed with Goreclaw. It's been pretty good. Okay, now we have a random blue-green card, Kenris Spellspear, Ravenous Sailback, and some stuff. It's still hard for me to believe that Ravenous Sailback is an uncommon. It just doesn't really play like one. It really does just play like a common, if you ask me. Yeah, Dismal Backwater was the card that was taken here, and I don't really understand this one. We're not splashing any black cards right now, and I think there are definitely better cards that you could take here as speculation. Black has not seemed open, and there's not a whole lot of incredibly strong black rares that you could play off a single black mana that I think are worth splashing either. So I'm inclined to take the Emoti. There is a world where even with the deck that we're looking at below, we could possibly splash the green, and it is definitely just better than most of the other cards inside the pack. Not really going to splash a Ravenous Sailback, not going to splash an Arachnoid Adaptation, and red didn't seem like it was too open with a Kenris Spellspear. So I'm on Emoti. There's another Overgrown Pest, and at this point I'm starting to wonder if maybe we're supposed to be like a white-green or blue-green splashing some number of cards, maybe white-green specifically. There's also a Wildwood Escort still inside the pack, which is pretty cool. Protocol Knight, really a card that you only want to play if you're overloaded on Knights, because the front face of it is pretty mediocre. If you're not routinely getting that stun counter, this card is very not worth it. And right now, you don't have enough stun counters, or enough chances to proc the stun counter, and your deck isn't really aggressive enough to make the best use of this. So for me, the pick is Overgrown Pest, and try to audible into some sort of green deck. Yep, now we have the Invasion of Perulia, which is not a bad card. It is kind of like a Moment of Truth on base that kind of is a little bit difficult to work with. You do have to get your Scry 3 to work properly to make it happen. But if you can get a land on top, which is pretty easy to do, you'll draw the card most of the time. Speaking of Moment of Truth, that's actually the card that gets taken here. This card's not that good, and the upside is never that great. Like, the best you're going to do with this is what it says on the card. You may as well just play the Invasion of Perulia. And considering that earlier you took the Goreclaw anyway, like, I don't really understand exactly the point of the Moment of Truth. You're just going to be so unlikely to play it at the end, even if you make playables with a bunch of random 2s and 3s and stuff. So I'm definitely on the Invasion over this other stuff. Although there is a nod to the Blighted Burgeoning, because if I want to splash blue, it is a card that can enable that to happen. There's a Streetwise Negotiator, as well as a Wary Thespian, and an Assimilate Essence. So it is looking like green, white, and blue are kind of the colors that are getting shipped around the most often, and green seems to be the most open in this pack. Streetwise Negotiator is an extremely strong 2-mana play. It's a 2-mana 3/3 that also you can kind of ship that counter around to do some cool stuff. Also, it does give the creature that ability until end of turn. So if you randomly, and I've had this come up in one game, an opponent played a Streetwise Negotiator and played it on a creature I had that had very high power but rather low toughness, and then they attacked, and not thinking I blocked, not knowing that my creature had lower power, and I got kind of owned by it. The UI in Arena does show you, but if you're not paying attention, you can still miss it, and I did get owned. So that sucked for me. However, Streetwise Negotiator, still a great card. Still pretty wonderful to have, and I think I would take it over this other stuff. There's Sandstorm Moloch, which is kind of the poster child for why you should consider being open even near the middle to end of Pack 2, because this card's good. Not only is it good, it's I think better than most of our threes. It's better than Isaac Ataxius, I think, on average. And I think it's better than Zalfiran Lancer if you're not dedicated knights. Billy Rider, really a card that you need to be modifying to make work at all. And I think usually in a random white deck, it will fare worse if you don't have ways to modify it than a Sandstorm Moloch. Inspired Charge, this is not a real card. This card is bad. You should just not play it. Wildwood Escort, definitely a card that I'd be taking here, because I had been consistently taking some of the green cards. We already have an Overgrown Pest or two, as well as a Streetwise Negotiator and the Goreclaw. This is a way to get back your bomb rares like specifically Goreclaw and the Rona that we picked up earlier, if you're going to end up inside a green-blue, which it looks like might be a little bit more likely than green-white. Well, there's the seal from existence. It wheels. That's pretty big news. Definitely the pick over any of this other stuff. There's a Fertilid's Favor, which is a way to put counters on some of your stuff. Given that we already have a Kithkin Billy Rider, a random 2+1/+1 counters on that Billy Rider go a long way. And it curves straight into it as well. So you attack with that Billy Rider, they try to shove something in front of it. Surprise, now I have 3 power Jobble Striker that probably will take out that creature without much effort. Sunder the Gateway, not really a bad card, definitely a 2 that you can play, but it's also not that impressive. The versatility really isn't worth the fact that you're not getting anything out of that 2 except a 2/2. There's an emote on the wheel. Definitely still kind of telling me that green might be open here. Wildwood Escort, speaking to that green being open more. And this was the pack that we took the Overgrown Pest out of. At least I would have taken the Overgrown Pest out of. There's a Scroll Shift, comes back, Island, and then pack 3. Alright, so we have a Cut Short, an Invasion of Margonda, Ravenous Sailback, and some stuff. So Invasion of Margonda is a little bit difficult to make work, but I've been pretty impressed with it. The only real problem with it is that the creature that you usually make fight generally can't attack, because they'll have pretty okay blocks, because usually the creature that fought has already taken some damage. Not really considering the Ravenous Sailback or the Rona, or the Vengeant Earth or the Kithkin Billy Rider. I think Cut Short or Invasion is correct here, and I am a bit more inclined towards the Cut Short. Glistening Dawn, we're getting paid off for the green picks that I would have made in the previous pack, but unfortunately, we don't really have a lot of great ways to splash. We have one Blighted Burgeoning, one Fertilid's Favor, and a small handful of green cards. Not really enough for me to consider this especially playable now, but we could try to make it work. We just have to really prioritize any kind of mana fixing we find. Although the version of the deck that I would have drafted, based on the picks that I saw, would be able to take this pretty confidently. Alright, now we have a Tidal Terror, which if we're looking to splash any of these blue cards like Rona, would be a solid way to do it, besides, you know, the random Overgrown Pests and all that stuff. Fertilid's Favor and the Blighted Burgeoning. Yeah, this is just really not that great of a pack. We've definitely seen better ones. So I don't really know off the top of my head what my deck would have looked like not taking all the cards that Charlie took and instead taking the green cards. If we're more on the green-white side, I think that a card like Golden Scale Aeronaut probably isn't as valuable to me as Angelic Intervention. considering we would have had like 2 Wildwood escorts. And if we're on the blue-white side, I think that Cyber Cryptomancer is probably more valuable to me than Tidal Terror, or on the blue-green rather. That this is more valuable to me than Tidal Terror, and definitely more valuable to me than the Change the Equation. There's a Tandem Takedown, another great green card. Definitely tells me that I'm already inside the right colors, whatever they are, whether they're green, white, or green, blue. There's also a Serpent Blade Assailant, which we're hoping to get back on the wheel, because it's not only incredible with things like Tandem Takedown, but earlier there was a Cosmic Hunger that I would have taken as well, and it's good with that. Cards inside the pack for specifically blue-white, there's an Invasion of Xerix and a Surge of Salvation. It's like admirable to see a great green card like this and wonder why it's in the pack and take it. But considering that Charlie has passed up on a lot of great green cards, a card like this just isn't gonna make the deck or be at its best, considering how many concessions you've made in trying to stick to the blue-white that you've seen. Now there's a Marshal of Zhalfir. Like, your last pick was the Tandem Takedown because it was a great green card and you've seen some green stuff going around. But now you're like, oh, well, there's a Marshal. Well, we're in pack 3. The ship's kind of sailed on deciding which deck you're going to be in. You just need to, like, pick cards that are along the lines of what you're doing and commit to it. By the time you hit pack 3, you should already be committed to the cause. And Marshal is a good card. But you've not really drafted the best deck for Knights. And it's not your fault. There really haven't been that many great Knights. You have a Kithkin Billy Rider, Norn's Inquisitor, one Zhalfirin Lancer, and the Swordsworn Cavalier. And that's it. That's it for Knights. Well, no, there's a Protocol Knight as well. So that's what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's not really enough Knights for this card to be like the best it's ever been. I know you didn't pass up on too many Knights, but considering the green cards, I think Serpent Blade Assailant might be the pick that I would have made if I had taken the green cards that I wanted to. At this stage of the draft, though, it really just looks like you're not going to make it to green, so Marshal would have been the correct pick. Cyber Cryptomancer would be perfectly fine here. Notably, we have a blue-green and a white-green card, so green definitely open, and either one of the possible color combinations that we would have been, we would have had a card that's actually pretty decent. But I do think that Cryptomancer is definitely good for this blue-white build. Wrath, also a pretty good gift. We would have probably taken the Serpent Blade Assailant in the green deck. Works well with our combat spells, and also putting a counter on something like a Billy Rider. Pretty nice. Alright, we have a Halo Hopper, an Enduring Bond Warden, and some stuff. Given that the removal plan is currently cut short, seal from existence, Disturbing Conversion, not really the worst card that's ever been. Of course, it's a little lame if you're trying to get in with your Knights, but it might just be better than the Bond Warden, although I guess since you have the Kithkin Billy Rider, that does edge it out over those. And there's another Kithkin Billy Rider, although notably we do get back the Invasion of Margonda, which tells me that we probably should have been in green this whole time. Although I definitely think the Billy Rider is the proper pick now, because it really seems like the ship has sailed on that green. Invasion of Perulia, yep, we're just not splashing green, sorry. This is definitely an Enduring Bond Warden pick. You're still probably going to play this card. You're not playing the Invasion. Angelic Intervention, or the Golden Scale Aeronaut. Generally, I'd like the Angelic Intervention quite a bit more, especially considering that you have some bombs that you want to protect, like Rona, as well as Marshall and the RAF. But I think there was a chance for us to take an Angelic Intervention earlier and we passed up on it. That said, I think Golden Scale Aeronaut actually fits the curve a little bit better. We only have 1-5. We could be low to the ground in Angelic Intervention School, but I don't know how high our creature count is, and there's definitely some stuff that we're looking to not play if we can help it. Definitely one of these two cards, though, not going to be the Seed of Hope at all. Surge of Salvation, that's a card that's also pretty good when you compare it to your bombs like Rona and all that. Protects them, also randomly hoses black and red, and that can be pretty valuable. Bonded Herdbeast is just awful. It's just not a good card, and you shouldn't be playing it, especially in a deck like this. We're just not playing this card. We don't have any way to splash green, and even if we did, this is not a card you want to splash. So Surge is pretty easily the pick here. Interesting to see a Shatter come around the slate. There's a Bowl Slinger, and another Aerial Boost if we decide that we want it. Alright, well that's the draft, folks. That is the draft. Okay, so I wasn't able to get the deck construction part of this website to work for this list. So we're just gonna go through it and take a look at what we have, and I'll discuss the changes that I would make to try and make this into a playable deck. Right now as it stands, in blue-white, there's 31 distinct cards in the deck. That means to bring it down to a reasonable 24, you need to cut 7. And there's a few pretty easy hits. Like at least one of the Bola Slingers immediately should probably come out. Inspired Charge also probably comes out. Scroll Shift, I don't really think does enough. Moment of Truth is number 4. Card that's just not really that good. Tidal Terror is probably not necessary. It's a pretty low to the ground build, I suppose. So that's what, a 5 there. 6, let's see. Okay, so right now the Protocol Knight has how many knights to work off of? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 other knights. So the Protocol Knight on average is going to, I don't know the percentage, but it's going to hit an okay amount of the time. I don't think it's that good, but I think it's better than Inga, so Inga would be my 6th cut. I just don't really like this card that much. Especially in this shell, it just doesn't feel like it does enough. It's not attacking the battle efficiently, it doesn't move the opponent's life total quickly. It's definitely more of a sit back and try to block and use removal spells kind of card, which means it's more, I think, appropriate for like specifically black-blue, which we're clearly not. I did look inside the sideboard to see if there's a very good playable green-white list specifically, because I don't think blue-white is worth pursuing given the spells that we have. But we're going to finish up with this one, cut one more card, and did I already say Scroll Shift? Let's see, I did one Bowl Slinger, Inga Rune Eyes, Inspired Charge, Tidal Terror. That's what, 4? 1, 2, 3, 4 there. Cut the Scroll Shift, it's 5. Moment of Truth is 6. Sunder the Gateway is card number 7 that I would cut from the deck. And then you could play a 16 land deck with like, I don't know, probably like 8 islands, 8 plains, and probably see decent results. I would say if you get like a 4-3, you're doing pretty good with this deck. It's not really all that impressive, but you have a Marshal of Zalfir, you have some card draw, you have some removal. You can definitely get some wins. You're just really lacking like any super highly concentrated power level, and some of the commons that would make a color combo like this especially worth, like Preening Champion. You're also missing Xeric Strobe Knight. We didn't see any of those, of course, but if we had, those would have been premier picks with how low to the ground this deck is. As far as green-white, though, the biggest problem with green-white is that we're missing out on a lot of our solid 2s, and we do need some 2s in this deck. We're taking out the Oracle and the Rona and the Cyber Cryptomancer and the Marshal as well as the Wrath. And that's a lot of things that we could play on turn 2 to stymie aggression. I just don't really like that plan. I think we definitely need playable 2s. And we're running pretty low. We do get the Placid Rottentail, but that's barely a card. It's not really at its best in a deck like this, although you do have the Kithkin Riders that work well with it. And if we were to try to audible to green-blue, even if we do make playables, which it doesn't really look like we have enough for that, we're still kind of struggling a bit, especially with the removal situation, because Seal from Existence is not very splashable, and we'd be cutting the 2 cut shorts or splashing them, which I think is a bit too inconsistent. So it looks like the blue-white build that I mentioned, taking out 1 Bola Slinger, 1 Angarun Eyes, Inspired Charge, Tidal Terror, Scroll Shift, Moment of Truth, and Sunder the Gateway to play 16 with a creature count of Enduring Bond Warden, 1 Norn's Inquisitor, Swordsworn Cavalier, Oracle of Tragedy, Rona, Cryptomancer, Marshal, Wrath, Kithkin Rider times 2, Zalfiran Lancer, Isaac Ataxius, 2 Bola Slingers, Protocol Knight. Yeah, it's 15 creatures. That seems like a pretty adequate number. And then you have some removal spells. That does seem like the best build of the deck, so that's probably what I would do. Anyway, that's all I have for this one, without actually being able to play the games and make informed mulligan decisions and all that. So I hope that you've learned something from this, as well as maybe gotten some insights on when to maybe pivot and when to realize that maybe your deck isn't quite coming together the way that you would like it to. Maybe it's possible that taking some of those green cards would have changed the pick orders of other people, and maybe things would have turned out differently, and green wouldn't have been as good as I think it would have. But given that we have a Tandem Takedown, a Glistening Dawn that we passed up on 2 Overgrown Pests, there was a Skittering Surveyor that we could have taken, there was also that 1 Cosmic Hunger, another Wildwood Escort, and I think 2 Serpent Blade Assailants, and then 2 Streetwise Negotiators that we passed up on as well, although I think only one of them was a really obvious pick. I think definitely that green was a better choice. But you know how it goes, sometimes things just happen. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this. Feel free to check out my description to find more information about my coaching services. You can also find links to the articles that I write for Hipsters of the Coast, as well as Commander's Herald, and you can also find links to my Substack, where 95% of my content is free, and my Twitter if you enjoy that particular brand of hellscape. Catch y'all later, everybody.